What's up, y'all? You are listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always with my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we've picked every game. We've made some predictions, but what we haven't done is pick the postseason. So we're going to take the next two episodes, talk about what we think is going to happen in the postseason, and then it will be irrelevant 2 weeks from now when football actually starts.
Right. Live bullets will fly, and then it'll be over. So everything we've said will be in vain unless we're right. And then, of course, we're going to bring it back up, talk about how we were right the whole way. No, we'll probably do it if we're wrong too, and say, hey, we thought this team was going to be bad or whatever. But
yeah, on the off chance that we're wrong,
right,
we will be doing an accountability episode at the end of the season. We did it this past season and talk about teams we were super right about, super wrong about. It's fun, right? It's talking season. Everybody's got an opinion. We're just making our calculated guesses on what's going to happen. So with that, we've had who we think is going to win each division in college football. Let's put pen to paper and let's pick some conference champions. Then at the end of this episode, we're going to talk about the AP Top 25, which came out last week, and compare it to our rankings, talk about a few teams that we think are overrated and underrated in the AP Top 25. Let's dive in, Daniel. We're going to start with the Power Five. Let's start with the ACC. To recall, we have Clemson winning the Atlantic. Shocker. We've got Miami winning the ACC Coastal. Daniel, who do we have winning the ACC?
We're doing it. We're going to pick Miami. I think that this is one of these that's definitely more of a risk. We try to, take measured risks. If there's going to be a year that Clemson has had, it's going to be this one where they're going to take somewhat of a step back relative to what they've been. They're still going to be a great program. And in a one-game scenario, we definitely think that Miami can do it. We think that, at least specifically me, I think that they're, running game, they've got 3 or 4 deep at running back that I feel good about. They've got a projected first-round offensive tackle on the left side, returning 4 starters. And then the thing that's making me buy in is a receiver talent infusion that they've got. They've got Charleston Rambo transferring in from Oklahoma. And then they've just got 4 or 5 really talented receivers coming in. Romello Brinson's leading them off. A bunch of 4-star guys coming in at receiver that they had a lot of drops last year. Their starters did. And I think that if they can get their drop rate somewhat under control, it would really help De'Aaron King or Jake Garcia, depending upon who's playing quarterback. If hopefully King is healthy and he's able to take them through. But I really big on them. And then defensively, I think they just got like the right amount of, talent, transfers, different things like this. I think that they've this is the best team that Manny Diaz will have had. And they can kind of take a step and build on what they did last year. So it's Miami. I mean, that's where we're at.
Biggest reason for me is going to be offensive line dramatically improving.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't see that early, this pick goes out the window.
Right.
But, right. Miami winning the ACC. Let's move on to the Big 12, where we caught a lot of heat because we got Texas going 10-2 when. With the games we picked, we had them 1 loss in conference, and we had, a top of the Big 12 standings, playing Oklahoma in a rematch in the Big 12 championship. And we're going to go with the Sooners here. So, hook 'em horns forever, Texas forever. But look, this is probably going to be Lincoln Riley's best team. And so you talk about Miami, Manny Diaz's best team. This is going to be Lincoln Riley's best team. And a big part of this team's success, obviously the offense is going to be what it's been and improve from last year, even back to, what it was the 3 previous years. But the defense is the story. Alex Grinch's 3rd year, the impact he's had cannot be understated. The defensive line for Oklahoma. This is a team that you couldn't say this about the last few years, but you're talking about a top 5 defensive line in the country. And that's one thing that all of the top 5 teams have in common is they all have really good defensive lines. And it's Oklahoma included. And so This will be Lincoln's best team. They're going to continue their streak of winning Big 12 championships and really put themselves in a good spot, being at 12-1, to be in the college football playoff.
One thing I'll say about it is, the flack that we may have caught from people about the Texas in the regular season. Texas has done this in the regular season while Oklahoma has remained the superior program. So we definitely believe in a one-off during the season that Texas can win that game, especially where it is. We also believe that Oklahoma will be hitting on all cylinders at this point. The biggest key for me with Oklahoma is going to be their running backs. I think they're going to have 2 top 10 running backs, maybe even top 5 running backs as far as in the country goes. Kennedy Brooks, huge believer in him. His yards per carry is amazing. And then obviously Eric Gray coming in from Tennessee. OU always has a good offensive line. They added some more talent in the transfer portal, so I don't have to get into it. We did that on that episode, so go listen there. But definitely believe in Oklahoma, balanced on offense, balanced on defense. Like you said, best team that Lincoln's had. So
Miami in the ACC, Oklahoma in the Big 12. Let's go to the Big 10, where we've got Ohio State winning out of the East. We've got Wisconsin winning out of the West. Daniel, who is our Big 10 champion?
It's Ohio State. We're not going to be crazy and pick, anything way outlandish or anything like that. We do think that, especially me, I really, I hate to speak for both of us all the time. So I'll say I think you feel the same way. Really think that Wisconsin is going to have a really good defense this year. I think they're going to be one of the best units in the country. They just aren't going to simply have the talent that Ohio State does on that side of the ball. Ohio State, in that scenario, I think is going to be swarming for them. Ohio State is 2 to 3 touchdowns better than everybody in that conference, just on a regular day. So definitely excited to see what the Buckeyes do. The receiving core is the best in the country. As we get further into this just era of the air raid and the airing the ball out, receiver has become just as important almost as quarterback. And so they've got 4 good quarterbacks, they got 12 good receivers. So give me the Buckeyes.
It's hard to believe that this could be Ryan Day's best team and they lost Justin Fields last season. But here we are.
and Trey Sermon, they're going to have better running backs this year probably with the freshmen coming in.
Yeah, this will be a dang good Ohio State team. Again, receiver room, best in the country by a lot. Large gap before the next team.
Mm-hmm.
That and a really stacked running back room and a good offensive line. And again, if you're going to have young quarterbacks, stack it around them. That's what they've done. So could be uncomfortable early on the road, but they're going to get comfortable real quick with this offense. And their defense, again, elite defensive line, great pass rush. Secondary should be improved. Deep linebackers. It's a complete team. So Ohio State at 13-0, winning the Big 10. Let's go to the Pac-12, where we've got out of the North, the Washington Huskies. Out of the South, the USC Trojans. And we're going to go with the Trojans to win the Pac-12 this year. So it's kind of awkward for USC because you're right there on the edge of playoff contention. We had them 10-2 in the regular season. This puts them at 11-2. So, going to the Rose Bowl, given their contract with the Rose Bowl in the Pac-12, but out of the playoff. And I think if you're a USC fan, this is worst case scenario because it means Clay Helton stays around longer because USC should be going to the playoff. But this team is too good not to go 10-2 and win the Pac-12, like talent-wise. And if they're not playing Oregon out of the North, especially, like Washington's not going to match up with them talent-wise. Their offensive line is really good. Their defensive pass rush, like they bring back Drake. It's not Drake London. It's the other Drake on their team. They've got
Jackson. I don't know.
I'm going to look it up. But Drake on the defensive line, they bring in Corey Foreman, who's going to be an immediate impact freshman for the pass rush. They got a deep receiving core. Keaton Slovis is a really good quarterback, but a lot of the buzz this camp cycle has been around Jackson Dart, their true freshman quarterback, and that he's been playing like the best quarterback there. And so, again, a team where we talked about having depth at quarterback. They've got depth at quarterback and really good depth at quarterback, a good receiver room, offensive line is where I have a question mark with USC, but I'm not a big believer in Washington defensive line for that matchup. So we have USC winning the Pac-12 at 11-2, and that's a Rose Bowl trip for the Trojans.
Yeah, much of what you said. Obviously, Drake London, one of the best receivers in the country, back for USC. Keaton Slovis, and then, like you said, he's getting pushed by Jackson Dart. So, worst case scenario, he loses his job, but to someone who's just playing better. So, I think they'll have a very capable quarterback one way or the other. And then, yeah, defensively, I mean, Corey Foreman has that type of, ability to be, as the number one or number two player in the nation, whatever he was, has the ability to be like that Kayvon Thibodeau, how he was at Oregon, where he has an immediate impact his freshman year. And that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting Corey Foreman to make a lot of noise that year in year one, and for that to be a big difference. I mean, we just named quarterback, wide receiver, and defensive end. Like that's what you want. Short of talking about the offensive line being good, that's what you want as far as being able to win big games and win most of your games. So get the quarterback on the ground and score a bunch of points. So,
and you had it right. That is Drake Jackson on the defensive line.
I don't
Well
know,
done.
man. It sounded right, so I just went with it.
Let's go to the SEC, and we've got part 4 in the Kirby era of Alabama and Georgia. They have played once in the SEC championship. They have played once in the national championship. They have played once in the regular season. So we've got Georgia coming out of the SEC East at 12-0. We've got Alabama coming out of the SEC West at 12-0. And so outside of it not being a national championship, this will be the biggest matchup of these two schools. Does Georgia finally get it done?
So Georgia has led at halftime of all 3 games.
Which is unreal.
They've led for, triple the minutes, and Alabama has won all 3 games. So it's truly it's happening. We're picking Georgia to beat them this year. They're going to win the SEC championship. This would be the second SEC championship under Kirby Smart. And if you've looked at these games, outside of just simply saying Georgia can't win the big game or something like that, if you're really watching these games, as far as the Saban assistance things go, it really only seems like Kirby Kirby has had the best chance because he's led the games. Kiffin had a fun game last year, but I just really expect Kirby knows what the recipe is. And you and I've talked about it several times, but he made the move last year as far as making the move to more explosive offense and bringing it. He went away from the safe offense and went and got Todd Monken and, really took a step out of his comfort zone. And he simply didn't have the quarterback until those last last 4 games. So really, I feel like it's been unfair up to this point, at least last year, for anyone touting that, Kirby didn't want to play explosive football, because I think that's exactly what he wanted to do. He just didn't have the guys to do it. So this year they're well stocked at the quarterback position. Carson Beck I know he's the first quarterback I just mentioned, but Carson Beck was a freshman last year who was not ready to be a competent backup, has had a year in the system, and he is going to be their number 2. So, outside, we talk about JT Daniels all the time. He's going to be the guy. If there is an injury, there's a Carson Beck who's a high 4-star, who's had a year in the system. There's a Brock Vandegrift who's a 5-star. So what was such a weakness last year is now a strength for the Georgia Bulldogs. And it's funny when we can zero in on one area for Georgia and talk about, because the rest of the team really is that stacked and deep as far as talent wise. Alabama, it's going to be tough to pick against them just in general, just because of their pedigree, because of Nick Saban. What they are replacing. This could be the year to get them. They don't tend to win back-to-back national championships or things like that. So this was a year that we tried to play those percentages as far as our picks go. It kind of is in line with what they lost in the draft. And having, what you've tabbed, Jacob, is maybe being the best season ever, best team ever. That's something that it's tough to repeat that, and get those juices flowing again to be as good as you were the year prior. So there might be, a chink in their armor this year. So we're picking the dogs to go over the Tide.
Alabama's got to replace their quarterback, running back, best offensive lineman, best wide receivers this offseason. We're picking them to go undefeated in the regular season. So it's not like we don't think they're going to be good, but
it's relative. It's all relative.
It's relative. So yes, this could be the year for Georgia. They return all of that I mentioned that Alabama lost. They made the commitment to be explosive last year. This defensive line is one of the best two defensive lines in the country. They're going to face the other best defensive line in game 1 with Clemson. And we're going to find a lot out about Georgia in that Clemson game. But even if they lose that game, the way the schedule sets up, they likely can very easily run the table and go into that game 11-1 with just as easy of a chance to win the SEC and get in the college football playoff. So this could be the year for Georgia. We're picking them to do it. Let's quickly name the group of 5 conference champions that we have selected. So, and then I'll talk about one of them. If you want to talk about a couple of them, you can as well. So in the American Conference, UCF over Cincinnati. And that's the one I'm going to talk about. Okay. Conference USA, we've got UAB over Marshall. In the MAC, we have Ball State winning the MAC. And with them in the Mountain West, we've got Boise State. And then in the Sun Belt, we have got the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. So UCF, I have a bone to pick with David Cobb of CBS Sports. He wrote an article today about how UCF's offense averaged over 500 yards a game last year. Gus's offense averages 330 yards a game. That UCF's going to hate this. Then I texted him and he said Dylan Gabriel's going to transfer to Tennessee because he's going to hate Gus's system. Let me tell you something, David Cobb and the rest of the people doubting UCF. This is the Gus bus. This is the coach that beat Nick Saban 3 times. Name me another coach that has beaten Nick Saban 3 times. You can't because no one else has. He was at a championship level program at Auburn. Believe it or not. Again, they're in the same division as Alabama. Standards are different there. They're in the SEC West. He's not in the SEC West anymore. This is UCF. He inherits a talented roster. And yes, while their offense wasn't averaging over 500 yards a game, they also declined every year under Josh Heupel. They lost more and more games each year despite averaging over 500 yards of offense. So it didn't matter because they were playing losing football. They're going to play winning football under Gus Malzahn. We have them 10-2 in the regular season. They're going to upset Cincinnati in the championship in a rematch because Gus Malzahn is a great football coach, and Auburn should have never fired him. So count me as captain of the Gus bus because we're taking this thing from Orlando to wherever they play the American Conference Championship. And we're taking down Cincinnati. Go Knights. 2017 national champions. Let's go. I love Disney World. It's Orlando. So
I think they play in Shreveport. I think that's where they maybe they play in the Senior Bowl. I don't know. But yeah, he goes from somewhere who it just means more, all the time, to a place that like they literally call their stadium. It's called the Bounce House. So like, I just don't. It's just a different, the pressure cooker thing was really funny by that reporter and
hilarious.
Everything. So that's great. I do think it's a good fit. I'm interested to see. That is funny that he mentioned it. He would transfer to Tennessee with all the other 6 transfer quarterbacks that they have. Makes a lot of sense, but it's just funny. I think you're right on with it. One that we kind of picked as a layup almost with Boise in the Mountain West. They are playing, Nevada, and Nevada being in that, and Nevada is a lot of times the media darling this year. You're seeing it more split this year than normal. Normal, it's always just a slam dunk Boise pick. We're going with Boise just because we do believe in Avalos, and then just that system, and then Hank Bachmeier at quarterback. We think they're going to be a little too much, but keep an eye on Nevada out there. That will be interesting. Not the slam dunk that we're used to in the Mountain West. Otherwise, not many more to talk about. The Sun Belt, we called it the Fun Belt. We were all about it last year. Louisiana, they're going to be fun. I'm interested to see how they play with the target on their back. they're not sneaking up on anybody this year. The fact they played Texas first game, if they played Texas first game last year, I expect them to probably beat Texas. This year, it's going to be tough to upset because that's the opening game. Obviously, they upset Iowa State last year in that first game. So it's going to be tough to upset a Big 12 team 2 years in a row. We obviously have them losing that game as our pick, but that's kind of what I'm interested to see. What can Louisiana do over the course of the season with the target on their back? It's firmly placed there. Napier, everybody knows about him now, mostly because they listened to the Extra Point podcast. We talked about him all last year. And then it's like the way that they grew up, over the season and they ended up in those final rankings. I think that it's similar. The secret's out. So everybody's going to play them tough this year.
100%. Let's go to the AP Top 25 poll, which dropped last Monday. And, we dropped our XPR, our extra point rankings the day before just to get it out there ahead of the AP poll.
Yeah.
And I've compared the two, but I want to hear from you, Daniel. What's one team that you think is, we'll start with overrated. Who is overrated on the AP Top 25 poll?
So, Notre Dame is what I look at. They're number 9. You and I have both been saying that Notre Dame has been right where they needed to be the past few years. I think they've always had cachet for their name because, they've just been a traditionally great program. That name got tarnished in the early 2000s and the 2010s and things like that. And then they built it back up. Brian Kelly has built it back up and been to the playoff a couple times and just had some good programs. It is going to be so difficult for them to be a top 10 team this year with what they've lost. I think 7-5 is a real reality for them, and 7-5 is not a top 10 team. We have them, I believe 16 is where we have them in our rankings. I think that's about right, at least to start the year. We'll see where things go. They lost 5 offensive linemen all to the NFL, and they're all going to play in the NFL. They're all really great. And then losing Book. Kyron Williams is back at running back, but, it just is what it is. The offense was one-dimensional as it was last year. They've got Jack Conan at quarterback. So, he's a very mediocre guy. I think he's going to be fine. He can play winning football, but he's not going to make them elite. He's not going to make them explosive overnight if Ian Book was not able to do that. So I do like Marcus Freeman as the defensive coordinator. I like him coming in from Cincinnati. I think that's big. I do think that he's going to help them overall. This year, though, that's overrated.
I like it. I agree with you. I'm going to go Cincinnati. Of course, given my UCF rant, got to be on the other end of that with Cincinnati. Right. Get some insurance there. Yeah, Cincy, AP poll, they're listed at, this is the highest group of five team has started. They're at 8. We have them at 19 in the extra point rankings. And bottom line is, I think they're going to lose to Notre Dame and to Indiana. And therefore, I don't think they're as good as those two teams. I didn't have Indiana in my top 20. And right. So the fact that they're at 8, like, you're telling me that you think they'd beat North Carolina? Like, you think they'd beat Oregon, Wisconsin, Florida. Miami? Yeah. Like, of course not. LSU? They're not beating any of those teams. LSU? No. USC, Indiana's at 17. Iowa, Penn State, Washington,
I do think
Texas.
They got a lot of street cred last year for hanging in with Georgia. But honestly, if you look at the stats, like, Georgia just kept them in that game by stubbing their toe on third down. So that's just the biggest thing. And then they just lost Marcus Freeman at DC. So, like we just mentioned, to Notre Dame.
All right, we've got underrated. Excuse me, we've had overrated. Who's your underrated team?
Underrated is going to be Miami. The U, all right? They have them at 14 here. We have them in our top 10. I think they're
at 8.
Yep. We have them at 8. So, obviously, we have them eventually winning the ACC championship. But even if they don't do that, I think they're going to have a great regular season, and it's going to warrant a higher rating than 14. We have them above North Carolina. I think they're as close to a complete team as you can be without having, that elite depth. I think that's going to be their biggest issue. But these other teams that are listed, in the AP poll and then also in the XPR around that, 7 to 12 range, I think they're better than most of those teams. So that's why we got them at 8.
I'm forgetting who I said. LSU.
Who you said was underrated?
Did I say I was going to do LSU? I'm doing LSU regardless. LSU is underrated in this AP Top 25 poll.
Oh, you're going to do Wisconsin, but
Wisconsin. Thank goodness. Okay. Well, I do think LSU is underrated at 16. Wisconsin is severely underrated at 12. And we had them at 7. That's exactly where I ranked them in my top 25. This is a really, really good football team with, like, they're playing Wisconsin football, but they're doing it with an elite quarterback now. So Graham Mertz is coming back in. He's not going to have, hopefully, miss time with COVID and miss through 3 weeks. And they're not going to have to take, breaks on and off from playing games and take a month off of football. None of that stuff. So Wisconsin at 12 is fine. Wisconsin at 7 sounds a whole lot more accurate to what this team's going to play to this year, the level they're going to play to. So we have Wisconsin at 7. Again, we have this team going 10-2, and I think they're staying on the same field as Ohio State. I'm not saying they're going to, we don't think they're going to beat Ohio State, but they can make it a competitive football game. So we love Wisconsin this year, and that defense is going to be nasty. And they're the best team in the Big Ten West, and I think there's a little bit of a gap in between them and the next best team. So Wisconsin's my team that is underrated. Be sure to follow us on social media. We're going to have some cool graphics up. We have our rankings up there during the season that we're going to drop every single week. Daniel, what else can we find on social? Where else can you follow us?
Well, follow us. Did you say at the Extra Point Pod on both Instagram and Facebook? We want you to get, to our show, whether it be on YouTube, which is what we're really trying to push. So, if you listen to us on podcasts, first of all, thank you. We appreciate that. Really want to get our viewership up on YouTube. If you listen to our podcast, but you're not subscribed on YouTube, let's make it happen. Go there and do that. Follow the link in our link tree on both Instagram and Facebook. If you're not following the show there, why not? Go ahead and do it. That way you can see these graphics that we're talking about. You can see our rankings when we put them up. You can see, when we list out, win-loss and all these kinds of things. It's fun to go ahead and comment. Tell us what your thoughts are. Do you have a different overrated, underrated team? Something like that. That's where you can let us know. Social media and on YouTube. And then if you are listening, go ahead and put, Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. That helps us get recommended. If you want something mentioned in the show, do it there. And we will definitely be following up.
You can follow him on Twitter at DeepSouthDaniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob.